Hey everybody, this week we're going to talk about two films that I watched in the last week or so. Both are cop movies. Both feature actors who sort of are emblematic of a more conservative audience viewpoint. And both movies are very blatantly kind of aimed at, like, angry dads who hate modern America. I'm talking, of course, about S. Craig Zahler's Dragged Across Concrete, and also John Lee Hancock's new film, The Highwaymen, which recently debuted on Netflix. The two films aren't particularly similar stylistically. Like, the actual look and feel and visual language of both films is pretty separate, I would say. But they both feel like movies that are designed to cater to the same sort of theoretical audience. Before I get any further, I will say that I, for the most part, enjoyed both films for different reasons. I'll also say that I am not a person who goes out of their way to, like, not watch movies just because they feature actors or written or directed by people whose political beliefs I disagree with. That's, you know, sometimes I think if someone, like, seems gross enough to me, I'll avoid their work. Like, I very rarely actually have to pay to see movies anyway, so it's not so much like a voting with my dollar kind of thing. But just in general, I am not a person who, like, freaks out and is, like, cancels filmmakers and stuff like that. Like, anyone who's known me for a long period of time knows how long it took me to stop watching Woody Allen movies. Like, I'm not perfect. That said, both of these films have, like a bit of ickiness to them that feels weird and, like, kind of, like, stoked something in me where I was kind of like, eh. But at the same time, I do think that there's enough about both films that they're worth exploring. Dragged Across Concrete stars Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn as a pair of police officers who are both suspended for, you know, going too far on the job. There's, like, video footage of them, like, assaulting like a person of color, and then they get suspended. And then, you know, they're not making money because they're on suspension, so they plan to, like, heist a heist. There's, like, a heist they find out is going to happen, like a bank robbery, and they plan to, like, steal from the bank robbers. And that's, like, the general crux of the movie. There's also a whole other third, like, prong of the film starring like a black dude who gets out of prison who's, like, used to be a drug dealer, and, like, he ends up being on sort of a collision course with the main characters. And, like, that stuff actually ends up being pretty interesting once we get to it in the movie. But a large thrust of the nearly 3-hour runtime really is just, like, Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn just in a car being white cops who are, like, obviously racist. There's a lot of controversy surrounding S. Craig Zahler's films. Some, like, make sense and some of it's kind of dumb. Like, on the one hand, I think sometimes people are doing too much when it comes to criticizing Zahler's work because he tends to have movies that, you know, you can read as seeming like they're, like, Trumpist cinema, I suppose. I disagree with some of that because the films are often too contradictory within the films for you to basically just say, oh, this guy's making movies for, like, Trump voters and blah, blah, he's racist, he's a bad guy. Solely because he tends to write movies that have people that espouse similar views. Like, up until recently, I don't think it was commonplace for us to, like, hate movies or refuse to watch them because people in it were unsavory or we disagreed with them. I mean, I feel like every television series after The Sopranos is basically the same show about a shitty guy who's, like, a bad person, but he has complexity, and we watched that for 5 years. So it seems odd to me that, like, you know, we got through The Shield with Vic Mackey intact, but, like, now there's a movie about a cop who hates Mexican people, and we're like, ugh, no, like, newsflash, a lot of cops hate Mexican people, and it would be weird to just pretend otherwise when you make movies about them. The cop genre as a whole is something that, you know, can be sort of a problematic thing to enjoy if you're someone who doesn't like police officers and has plenty of reasons to think that the whole like, Blue Lives Matter quadrant of the country is, like, shitty and wrong. You know, how do you reconcile that with loving Law and Order? I love cop movies. I've watched tons of cop movies, tons of cop shows. It's a genre I'm super into. I do think there are certain elements of the genre that are infantilizing and a little weird. I think David Mamet wrote an essay about this in his book, Bambi vs. Godzilla, where he sort of dragged out a lot of stuff about the typical tropes of what makes a cop movie and how, as a genre, it tends to placate, like, masculine identity in a way. It sort of makes people feel better about the world because there's this person with a gun who's, like, rejecting their father figure, you know, typically, like, the lieutenant boss who ends up being corrupt or something, and, like, reasserting things and setting them right. Man, went on a lot of weird tangents, so I'm not going to sit here and, like, paraphrase the whole essay, but suffice to say, there's a lot about cop movies, just in general, especially in recent years, where, you know, you feel weird, okay? You feel weird turning on the news and seeing tons of stories about police officers killing unarmed people of color, getting away with it, and then, you know, you turn on a movie with a cop in it, and the cop's always, like, super justified in everything they do, and you're like, it just feels weird. It's not as fun as it used to be, I guess. Dragged Across Concrete isn't that, though. Dragged Across Concrete, these are 100% the cops you see on the news. They're old school, they don't like the way the world has become, they hate PC culture. You know, it makes sense, right? Like there's a lot of cops who are like this, and getting Mel Gibson, noted racist, to play one of them, and Vince Vaughn, a dude who like is obviously pretty conservative. It's not that weird, and the performances from both guys are pretty great. I'm not gonna lie. Vince Vaughn is fine; he's like decent, but Mel Gibson's really good. Like, you can hate Mel Gibson. I'm not a fan. I don't want to go hang out with Mel Gibson, but he's still a very talented actor, and he just like has a lot of star power still, and he's really good. Like, it's a very good performance. I'm not gonna like pretend otherwise. And the thing about the film that's so odd to me is that on the surface, it seems like it's going to be aiming towards that demographic. It seems like it's going to be like, you know, just a giant dog whistle masquerading itself as a genre exercise. But it's not. It almost seems like Zoller is just laughing at, like, the hypocrisy of these different stereotypes and stuff, you know? It seems like he was intending to have scenes where characters spoke the way you think they would speak when no one's around. For instance, there's a very key scene in Dragged Across Concrete that sets up the whole plot. Once Vince Vaughn and Mel Gibson's characters have been suspended, their boss, played by Don Johnson, is like reprimanding them and explaining how, hey, this video you guys fucking up got out, and I agree with your methods, but obviously the public doesn't, so yada yada yada, politics, politics, politics. But it's this really long scene. Every scene in Dragged Across Concrete is a very long scene. It's a long-ass movie. And they're talking and saying things that on paper sound correct. Like, I believe that a racist cop would say these things if no one was around. He was around other racist cops and felt safe. But the dialogue is always, like, a little bit off. Like, everything that Zoller writes, his dialogue is very strange. And, you know, he comes from a background as a novelist, so his dialogue tends to be less filmy and more, like, booky, but, like, in a weird way. And the whole scene just makes me think it's, like, a bit. Like, it just seems like an extended joke. No one really talks like this. It's just very strange. You know, you move from these characters talking about breakfast and Don Johnson waxing poetic about pumpernickel toast to, yeah, you know, it's these blacks and the Mexicans are ruining everything, and if we could just do our jobs, everything would be great. But it seems like they're all about to turn to the audience at any given moment and be like, right, this is what you think of us, right? Like, it's just it's weird. I can't even call it confrontational, because it doesn't feel like he's a provocateur and he's, like, pushing buttons. It feels passive-aggressive. It feels like he's just putting things out there and, like, leaning back and just waiting for you to, like, argue over it. You know what I mean? It's an odd way of doing things. Even the way he depicts violence and stuff in the film, it's gleeful in a way that is, like, comical. Like, it's almost like something Sam Raimi would do. There are times watching the movie where I thought about Quentin Tarantino, obviously, because Tarantino is someone who, you know, likes to luxuriate in dialogue, and his movies are kind of long, and he has violence, and he's someone who loves pulp. Like, there's similarities between the two guys, you know? But whereas Quentin Tarantino is constantly aware of and pushing what I think are, like, pop cultural awareness things, like, he's obviously placing the story he's telling in the context of the movies that inspired it. There's all that stuff going on. Zoller doesn't seem like he's doing that. It seems like he's doing weird exploitation cinema pulp stuff in a version of the real world that feels even less like the real world than Tarantino's. Like, Tarantino's is, like, glossy and, like, stylized and, like, mannered and, like, clever. And then Zoller's just feels like maybe what Purgatory would be like. It's just kind of this, it's odd. I'm embarrassed that I can't even put it into words, but it's not as noticeable in his first film, Bone Tomahawk, because Bone Tomahawk is set in the West, and it's like a Western, and it has more overt genre things, and it's a period piece. But in Brawl in Cell Block 99 and this Dragged Across Concrete, because they take place within a simulacrum of the real world, it's more obvious how strange his authorial voice is and how distant it is from what we consider to be actual realism. Dragged Across Concrete to me feels like a half measure. It feels like a film about the type of guys you think would star in a movie aimed at, like, Trumpy people. You know, you think it would be like this dastardly sort of, you know, right-wing exploitation film or something, but it doesn't. It isn't that. It genuinely isn't. It's actually a bunch of other things, and it's not all of those things in a very good way. And sometimes it is good, and sometimes it's not. And it's interesting, and I think people should watch it and kind of see what they get out of it, because everyone I've discussed the film with who has watched it has had, like, drastically different opinions on it, and I've read tons of different reviews of it, and all of the reviews are, like, drastically different. People really are reacting to the film in interesting ways, which makes me think that there's something really there, even if I can't put my finger on it. But, you know, Dragged Across Concrete ultimately is not what people think it is. It's not a lot better than what people think it is, but it's not worse, and it's not that thing. I don't think Zoller is like a troll. I don't think he's someone who couches his cinema in the same language of hatred and things like that. I don't think this is a situation where it's like a guy is pretending to be something to like troll people in such a way that he may as well be the thing he's pretending to be. I don't think this is that. I think that he has very curious and odd ways of looking at the world and of exploring different types of people. And sometimes it feels like he's really only trying to amuse or entertain himself. You know, I feel like this is a situation where this guy is making the kinds of movies he would want to watch, and those movies are rubbing different people in different ways. I mean, just the fact that, like, Armand White loves this movie alone is going to let you know that maybe something about it's, like, not quite correct. Maybe something's rotten in Denmark. But I do think it's something people should experience on their own rather than forming opinions about it based solely on think pieces and stuff. The other film that I want to talk about, The Highwaymen, is a little bit different. The Highwaymen is sort of a throwback. Whereas Dragged Across Concrete is a throwback, I would say, ideologically. It's not really a throwback stylistically or anything like that. It's still a very unique and kind of weirdly made film. The Highwaymen is like real meat and potatoes, procedural, you know, action thriller stuff. It's directed by John Lee Hancock, sort of a dad cinema legend for having made films like The Rookie and I mean, he made The Founder, too, which is a movie I really like, but he also directed The Blind Side, so you can already see where these might be going. The film is about two former Texas Rangers played by Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson. Kevin Costner is doing this, like, weird, like, Batman voice the whole time, and Woody Harrelson's basically playing, like, a more impotent version of his character from True Detective, but they're the main characters. And they're these dudes who are put on a special detail to try to bring down Bonnie and Clyde. Yeah. It's basically retelling the Bonnie and Clyde story, but from the side of the actual lawmen who were out to get them, and many of whom were actually killed by Bonnie and Clyde. And it's obviously super different than the Arthur Penn movie, Bonnie and Clyde. Like, totally different. You know, Bonnie and Clyde in history are always treated as sort of these pop cultural figures. Like, they're sort of iconic. Their celebrity status, their place in the history of, like, bank robbers and stuff. They tend to be written and talked of sympathetically, you know. They're like pretty white criminals who stole a lot of money and shot a lot of cops and got away with it. So of course we always want to look back at them fondly. And this movie is sort of like, what if, fuck that. What if we do the opposite? What if we talk about the real heroes, cops? This movie is odd because whereas Dragged Across Concrete takes place in the present day and is wrestling with issues that we're all currently wrestling with every day, The Highwaymen takes place in the past and seems to be trying to say things about the present anyway. And obviously that's something that all period pieces are going to do. You know what I mean? They're made about the past, but they're always going to be trying to create tethers to the present, obviously. But the way The Highwaymen does it is fucking weird. It is a movie where I feel like every scene, the two old, ornery main characters are like looking through the camera at me and judging me, a millennial, for, I don't know, not being them. It's very strange. But the way they talk about Bonnie and Clyde, the way they talk about the young people that idolize them, the way they talk about the reporters who report on them, all of that stuff in the movie to get taken together, to me, is like real coded language just about like the liberal media and about like millennials and young people and also Gen Z and there's literally a part of the movie where Woody Harrelson is in a car. He's like reading a news story about Bonnie and Clyde. Basically says something to the effect of like, I remember you had to actually do something to be famous. Now you gotta do is shoot somebody. And that's fine. It's just that the way he says it, it literally has the same cadence, like the exact same like lilt as someone complaining about the Kardashians. And I thought that was a weird fucking parallel to put in a movie about lawmen running down bank robbers. It just is uncomfortable, you know. It's odd because I think Kevin Costner is one of the most underrated actors like of his generation. I think he's a really talented guy. I think he's got longevity. He's been around for a long time. There's a certain specific kind of sincerity and like down-homeness about him I really like. And when I was younger, I could never understand why Kevin Costner was in movies. I was like, this guy's such a lame. But as I've gotten older, like every time I watch something he does, I'm always like, man, Kevin Costner really fucking had it, you know? And it was cool seeing him in this. And it's cool seeing him play an old guy who actually is an old guy. He holds his own. Woody Harrelson doesn't have quite as much to do, but Kevin Costner gets tons of like good lines, and you know he has a lot of presence. I know I said a lot about actors, but that's really important to me. I think was someone has like that like heft on screen. I like that. it's just, I don't want to watch a whole movie that's just like, that has zero, and I mean zero sort of sympathy for like people that commit crimes or do bad things. Like, it really paints Bonnie and Clyde as being like arch villain demon people because they robbed banks and like, and they killed some cops. Obviously killing cops is like, you know, killing people is bad, obviously. I'm not trying to dispute that. But I don't know, man. I don't have a whole lot of, I didn't watch this movie feeling like it was corrective, you know? I feel like the film is designed to be corrective. Like, hey, we have had so many movies and television movies and different things and books about Bonnie and Clyde, and we're going to set things right and talk about the real heroes. Like, the epilogue of the film even talks about how many people were at Bonnie and Clyde's like funeral in such a way that it seems to be contrasting it with, oh, but all these police officers died. Nobody cared. But they cared about these celebrities. Celebrities are bad. Dude, I personally am just super tired of, like, people pointing at, like, celebrity culture, youth culture, and all these different things as being what's wrong with the world, and not any of the larger issues that lead to the things that people are actually mad about. So to have a movie that should just be about, like, dudes with shotguns chasing people in old cars, which is, like, the best parts of the movie, to, like, throw in so much, like, moralizing and stuff was just exhausting. Like, you could make this exact movie half an hour shorter and just have Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson barreling down highways with a bunch of guns, talking about how they're going to get Bonnie and Clyde, and that would be tight. Like, that movie would just be cool, because it'd be exciting to watch. But every other scene has to have space for all the moralizing and all the just, like, and like how all the young cops are stupid, and all the ones that have their new fancy two-way scanners are dumb, and they don't know how to really case a scene. Like, there's a scene where Kevin Costner is like just walking along a crime scene and figures out like 20 different things about it just from looking at it, like he's fucking Batman. It's literally like that scene in the Fast and Furious where like Toretto like does CSI by looking at like tire marks. And, like, that's fun and awesome because it's a Fast and Furious movie. Like, this is the past. And here you have one guy shitting on every other assembled lawman just because he can't put 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 10 plus 12 together in 3 seconds from looking at it. Just from, like, putting his hands on his hips and, like, being mad. And I was just like, dude, I don't fucking care. Every time it started up, every time I could feel that, like, potent dad energy emanating from the movie, I was just like, oh, I just did not care. And even then, I still felt like they didn't go far enough. My beef, ultimately, with both films together is that they both seem like they are flirting with the idea of catering to a specific audience. And I don't have respect for that. What I have respect for is blatant pandering. I think if you're going to do this, you just go whole fucking hog. You want to make movies that cater to people that share Blue Lives Matter memes on Facebook? Do it. Make movies about, like, all of your weird beliefs and all your weird feelings. Just go whole hog. If that's what you want to do, just be honest about it. You know what I mean? Don't try to, like, couch it in other kinds of language. Don't try to act like it's just like, oh, just a good old throwback kind of movie. The minute somebody says throwback, I know what that means. All right? That means let's go back to when we got away with shit. You know, I'm not stupid. And if you want to do that, then, like, just go all the way. That's my whole thing. To me, the best moment in The Highwaymen is also a moment that I personally disagree with. It's when they finally kill Bonnie and Clyde, and they shoot it the way Hitler dying at the end of Inglourious Basterds looked. It is over the top. It is visceral. These motherfuckers just get riddled with bullets. Like, it's severe, and it's weird and unnecessary. And I don't think the movie really earned killing these people. They never quite made them the boogeymen they wanted them to be for me. But when that moment came, I was like, you know what? These fuckers at least know what they're doing. They're letting that fantasy play out of, like, you know, that scene is not about cops getting back at criminals who took cops' lives. That's not. That scene, the way it plays out, is like every old fuck in this country who hates all the young people and all their ideas they disagree with, just wanting to fucking plug them with holes. And I respect that. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. But I was like, you know what? That's it. That's like the most honest fucking scene in the whole movie. You know? Dread to Cost Concrete never quite goes that far. Too much controversy is kicked up. You'd think it went a lot farther, but it doesn't. You know, it just flirts with it. And, yeah, my ultimate take on both these movies is just go whole hog. If that's what you want to do with your shit, then just do it. Fucking go balls out. Then you can, you know, get a pat on the back from me. Yeah, I don't know. The state of the cop movie is kind of weird. I don't know if we're going to keep going in this sort of, like, toyetic CSI route of TV procedural cop stories, or if we're just going to start drifting back into sort of fake Don Siegel, Dirty Harry territory. I'd be fine if we did it better than these two movies do it, you know? But it's interesting. I wonder what's going to happen in the next couple of years. If the cop genre, both in television and in film, is going to go in interesting directions, or if it's going to kind of be this weird, middle of the road shit. Who knows? That's the video for this week. Thank you guys for watching. Dragged Across Concrete's on VOD if you want to see it. The Highwaymen is on Netflix, as you probably know, because you probably went on Netflix to look for something else, and there's Kevin Costner with a big old gun. You can't avoid it. As always, if you guys like the videos and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. That way you can see the minute I put out a new video, which will be every Tuesday going forward, obviously. Next week's video is going to be a little more experimental, just in terms of subject matter, but I think it's something you guys are going to dig, and I hope you like it. Have a great week, everyone.